Thank you to the ancestors of this land and the land itself for providing a place for us to stand on and for us to grow. And thank you, Jane, for the tour. This is the final speaking event that I know of. Heading off tomorrow. But no doubt we'll be back sometime, because even though you say I'm former or ex-South African, I don't think that's possible. I'm South African, even though I live in Australia. You can't change the place of your birth. So I think really I'm an earthling, because we could get to the whole debate into what's endemic and what's not. And this debate's kind of at the foremost in our minds when we start to talk about a psychological parasite. So tonight's talk about who were the Gnostics and what happened to the Gnostics, and is actually a story about a slow, creeping psychological parasite. And one of the nature of this parasite is its disconnection, and through that disconnection, we because of our disconnection, we feel like we need to attach to things, and we cultivate an idea of ownership and an idea of territorialism. So as well explored in, I think, what was it, District 9, the movie, that it's context, and there are plants that are here that may have come thousands of years ago that are seen as, endemic. But then there's other plants that may have only been here for a couple of hundred years, like jacarandas, and they may not make the chop, and they get chopped down because you get people who are going, well, they're not from here, but what is here? Where's here? Is that just our local little ecosystem, and how big does that extend? Not from here could be not from this planet. I don't know, not from the star system, not from this galaxy. So, and this becomes really, with trees is one thing, because they move, but they move slowly. Coconuts do their own thing. Anywhere in the tropics or the subtropics, those seeds, wherever there's ocean, they float and they colonize themselves. And some people take plants around the world and they share them, like corn and avocados. And some plants have developed and evolved so many years with humans that they can't actually propagate without humans. Some bamboos and of course corn, maize, milis. And so some cultures believe that a gift of a plant, a food plant or a medicine plant, and they all have wonderful gifts, but a gift of a plant is the most amazing thing you can give, because it's a gift that keeps on giving, because that one plant just keeps unfolding endlessly. And so we do have invaders, but it's how we see them. Because of course we walking trees. We're the biggest invaders of all, as white people. We've colonized the whole planet, and instead of coming in and operating with the locals, the endemics, we've gone, well, no, this is our way. Here are our McDonald's, here are our cars, here are our technology. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that technology, but it can become a tool, and often it's the tool of this psychological parasite that I've mentioned and I'm going to get into later. So the first thing for me is to really honor this land and honor the lineage and honor the plants that grow here. And some of those plants may not be endemic, but I honor those too. And this is where I live at the moment. This is Wollumben, which means cloud catcher. It's the center of the largest volcano in the southern hemisphere. Was the largest volcano. It blew up. It's still a massive crater, and that's the paramagnetic basalt plug in the middle. And this is part of a giant sacred site complex. This is near Byron Bay, and the reason I use the word gracias, even though that's not my, it's just doing its thing. Even though that's not my hometown, is because the word gracias actually gives a little more idea of the state of grace that one can attain through that cultivation of an attitude of gratitude. You see, the state of grace that we attain through being thankful, through offering gratitude, is possibly one of the most important reconnecting factors. If you took the planet and you took our Western cultures, and I'm using that term quite loosely, but if you look at Western culture in general, the single biggest malaise could be seen as disconnection. From disconnection unfolds poverty and war and competition and ownership and all the so-called earth-damaging things that we're concerned about maybe as a plant community are all basically side shoots from the initial disease, which is disconnectivity. And our ancestors could spot that really quickly when there was a tight tribal group and someone started to display the symptoms of a psychological parasite, of this disconnectivity. It was really obvious. And they would grab that person and they'd pull them in and they'd go through healing processes, and there's elaborate ones all around the world. Like for example in Hawaii, they have Ho'oponopono, which is like a reconnecting back in, and it may take 3 days, may take a week, but the whole tribe gathers around and everyone's together and it's all focused on reconnecting or clearing that person's aka cord, their cord, from connecting them to the earth and them to the divine. And if it's blocked up with darkness, however long it takes, they clear it. And then they find the words and the mental pictures that created the opportunity for that psychological parasite or that disease. And then once that's clear, the Ho'oponopono is finished, it's done. Nobody mentions it again, because just using the name will invite that back again. And so all of these diseases are dealt with as a whole group. Just because one person's sick or displaying, it means that's a reflection on the whole. And that's important. Okay, so I'm going to roll on. Tonight I thought I'd talk a little bit about Sophia and the Gnostics. That's Sophia over there. No. So the Aeon Sophia is literally a goddess, and she offered her body to become the planet. And so our ancestors believed that the physical world itself was the goddess, and as part of the overall Godhead, there was an invisible, let's call it a masculine aspect, and a visible, very real feminine aspect. And together they were, in most senses of the word, inseparable. But the cultures of that time recognized that what we were standing on, the thing that I'm calling the ancestral world, literally was the goddess. And so every tree was sacred, every river, the ocean. People could not imagine that there would be people like us in the future to desecrate the goddess in the way in which we do. And so we have to ask ourselves, even as intelligent, logical Western culture, what enables us to cut down the forests, to dump our pollution into the rivers, to test 60, 70 odd nuclear bombs in the atmosphere and whenever it was in the 50s. What enables us to do that? Because if you were looking at it from any relative perspective, you'd have to say that someone who is destroying the very lifeblood of themselves would be insane, right? It's logical. So what happened? And 1600 years ago, there was a sect called the Gnostics, and they were a very interesting offshoot at the time when Christianity was kind of getting into its groove, and there was a few religions kicking off. What the Gnostics did that was kind of interesting. Gnosis is kind of like knowing, but it's a different form of knowing, because it's not a knowing, it's more like a wisdom. It's a true connection. You know, if you learn kinesiology, or if you learn some form of like a pendulum or some diagnostic tool, what that does is it enables you to tap into your body, which, because it's part of the earth, you use that body as like a ground of truth. And it gives you information that's not accessible by the brain, because the brain's kind of, by its very nature, is disconnected in its thinking unless it's functioning through the heart. And so what the Gnostics did is they used direct communication with the divine, either the physical, which was Sophia, or the spirit, the invisible aspect, and their connection or communication was direct with the divine. So all the information was coming straight from source. And this created a problem, because the church at the time had a hierarchy. And within that hierarchy, it was no good to bypass the hierarchy and go direct to the big boss, because that disempowered that hierarchy. And that hierarchy was tied in with politics and business, much like it is today. And so that created a problem. And so what happened was, 1600 years ago, the Gnostics were persecuted, and whether it was the Inquisition, or various witch hunts, what was happening was there was an elimination of all types of people who used to be kind of, in a sense, pagan, but were now the Gnostics. And the Gnostics took a lot of their information, wrote it down, and scuffled it away. And one of the places they hid their information was in a cave called Nag Hammadi. And in the 50s, there was a goat herder who was cold and sheltering from a storm in this cave in Nag Hammadi, and came across some urns. And in the urns there were these scrolls. It was cold. He burnt some to keep warm. But what was left was cherished, because they were these 1600-year-old Gnostic texts, which we have today, called the Nag Hammadi texts. And you can go and get hold of them, and there's translations. There's a few different translations. But some of the most interesting translations are, there's a guy called John Lash. How many people here have heard the name John Lash? A couple. Okay, so John Lash, John Lash wrote a book called Not in His Image, about the rise of monotheism. And the story is basically the story of the severing of human cultures from the earth, and the worship of a male, wrathful deity, sky god, called Yahweh, or Allah. And so the three great monotheistic traditions or religions was Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But each one of those three did the same thing. Even though they were at loggerheads with each other, their basis was a belief in an invisible, male, archetypal, wrathful deity, and that it didn't really matter what you did to the earth, because the time that was important was afterwards, the heaven. If you died with Allah on your lips, you would go to some paradise with however many virgins were awaiting you. And if you were Christian, it was, it was how you conducted yourself on earth was just one aspect, but it was all whether you were going to get through those pearly gates. And so this allowed people to do what I'm talking about, this desecration of the earth, because you know, it was all in the name of something else, or another god, and this was no longer sacred, this earth. And so now we find ourselves at a very interesting time, where, as a species, we can potentially go past the point where the earth is not recoverable anymore, and then we will, as a species, potentially die. And we're approaching this really rapidly. Some scientists think we're already past this point. I know different, but that's just my opinion. So, what was spoken about by John Lash was interesting, which is a prophesized time, which is round about now, which is the return of Sophia. And we can just speculate what that actually means. But the basic concept is that enough people on earth were going to awaken to the idea that we were under the spell of a psychological parasite. And in that awakening, there would be a re-sacralization of the earth. And at that point, the earth would go through a new birth and a golden age. Maybe that's true. But there's only one person. There's only one person who can make that decision. And that's you. Or me in this case. It's us as individuals. If we wait for someone else to do this, we'll be waiting
forever.
Forever. Exactly. So we are literally at the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, because this, from here on, it's serious. From here on, we're either part of the rebirth of Sophia, part of the reawakening, or we're not. And if we're not, it's not a good or bad thing. You just miss all the fun. So, I think that's Callanish in northern France, but the reason I've used this image for Return of the Gnostics, that image. The reason I use this image, other than it's gobsmackingly beautiful, with this northern lights, is that our ancestors seem to have known something that we've forgotten. And unless we remember what that is, we may miss this moment of playing our part, of playing our true role of what it is to be human on this planet. And that's what I'm going to get into. But the stone circles may be part of a very sophisticated, highly advanced Earth technology to focus a very specific type of energy that the body can generate, which may be a very important part of the rebirth or the reawakening of Sophia. And I'm going to go into that as soon as this starts jumping around. Not entirely sure what it's doing, but...
Is it a loose connection, Dave?
I don't know. But you know, if you can handle it, I can. You get to see the slides in between. So just to bring it back to what may be the obvious point here, which is that why are we here as a small group who plant people, and of course the focus of this particular plant group is a very narrow band of plants, a very special band of medicinal plants. And these medicinal plants are for deep psychological reconnection. They are, at their base, anti-parasites. and what they actually do as an anti-parasite is enable us to reconnect and get rid of the psychological parasite that's causing this in the first place. Yeah, pull it out if you want to restart it. And just to kind of give you a little bit of my history, in the year 2000, I went to Peru to learn about a little more about who I am, and a little bit more about a very specific form of shamanic plant medicine. And I went there specifically to drink ayahuasca. Now, what I didn't know is that I'd actually been drinking ayahuasca for a long time. In fact, I'd been drinking ayahuasca since I was 1. Now that may sound quite strange, because my parents had no idea. Really, they didn't. What I found when I came to the plant conference 2 years ago was that in the recovery remedy that I was drinking, that there was a spigaric, there was a homeopathic extract of Banisteriopsis carpi. And I'd been taking the exact same formulation since I was 1. And if you guys had been taking this recovery remedy, so have you.
Rescue remedy.
Yeah, the rescue remedy. For a long time, yeah. So like, it kind of would, I was, wow, that's interesting. Well, maybe not. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because as we start to reconnect, what we find is something really kind of interesting. First of all, the novelty, as Terence McKenna calls it, increases. Or our idea of synchronicity. Oh, geez, that's happening. Wow, isn't that synchronous? That's happening. But synchronicity comes from Kronos. He's one of the gods of time. But Kronos is like Shiva. You know, in one of Shiva's hands, he has a drum. He bangs that drum. Boom, boom, boom. Shiva's the destroyer. And Shiva is marking time from your birth to your death. It's not really your birth to your death, because you're an immortal spiritual being that was never born and can never die. It's the birth and the death of the idea of who you think you are and your body. Those are the things that are born and die. But Kronos, or the Greek god of time, is that same god of time. Click, clock, click, clock. You're getting older, time's passing. And in this case, time seems linear. It goes from the past, through the present, and into the future. But we know that as along with Kronos, this timeline is another timeline. And the god for that timeline was called Kyrios. So this Greek was the god of a different sort of time. You know, when it's autumn and the leaves start to turn yellow to red, that's not an actual time. When it's time, it's time. And it's the natural timing of all the cycles of nature. That's, or where I come from now, the dream time. It's rubber time. It's time. It's a different time. But in that time, it's more like a sphere. So if you go far enough into the future, you end up in the past. Or if you go far enough in the past, you end up in the future. Or if you happen to take one of these magical plants and you collapse your space-time body into your time-space body, space-time collapses and you end up in an ever-present now, where all of time exists, all future and all past, and all space exists. And this is amazing because the mind cannot inhabit this place. Only the heart can. The heart, as a cognitive organ, 60% neural tissue, can get this, that you could be omniscient and omnipresent and be God, along with everyone else being God at the same time. The brain would freak out. No, hold on. Am I God or you God? Because we can't both be God. Otherwise we would be gods, right? Plural. But it is. And not only just me and you, me and the tree, me and the earth, me and the sun, me and you. And this is what happens when people take some of these strong psychoactives. Mind blown, then what? Luckily the mind turns off, because it would not be having fun. But this other mind turns on, the heart mind. And that heart mind is incredible, because it's the mind that was designed to actually clock all of nature. And so now it all makes sense, all those plants. And look, the ants are part of that, and that's connected to that. And oh, we're all connected, right? Unity consciousness. That's the truth. It's my truth. It may not be your truth. It was the Gnostics' truth. And so the return of the Gnostics is an individual process for each one of us to reconnect ourselves back to source. And at that time, once we reconnect to source, we find out that we're connected to everyone and everything else. And so, what's this process? So this part of the process, the involution and the evolution part of the process, is kind of interesting. There's a lot of different spiritual beings and masters, and Steiner all, talked about this process of so Steiner's cosmology, for example, was humans were the first beings to come to Earth, but the last beings to take physical form. So out of human beings, so step back a moment, you look at the sun from outside our solar system and you'll see the Earth is in the sun. The heliosphere extends so far out that from out of our solar system you'd see the Earth was in the aura of the sun. So we're actually still part of the sun. But imagine we were separate for a moment. So according to Gotha, that Steiner then expanded upon, so the Earth was born out of the sun. And then this is human. This is human being. And then out of human being unfolded the mineral kingdoms. And then out of the mineral kingdoms, the microbiological kingdoms. Then the plant kingdoms. Then the animal kingdoms. And finally, once human being had unpacked its body from the spiritual into the physical, then human being took a body of its own to walk around in its greater body. And this is important because that is exactly why all the birds and the animals and the plants and the rocks are our kin, because it's actually part of the body. But we aren't just our bodies either. Our bodies are just the flesh suit that we've chosen as an immortal spiritual being to actually walk around in this greater body. And so we've got to be careful, because as soon as we think we're our bodies, we get caught in a whole different game. We get caught in a game of competition and survival of the fittest and fighting for resources and claiming stuff and making loads of money for our corporations and doing a whole bunch of stuff that equates to a psychological parasite. So those two processes there of evolution and involution. Sorry, I thought I'd play you something while I was chatting about this. Those two processes are the way in which spirit moves into matter, which humans have a part to play, and the way that matter moves back into spirit, which humans have a part to play. And the part that we have to play, or the part that we can play, is that as energy moves from spirit into matter, we have to recognize that we're the guardians of that energy and prepare ourselves much like an artist would take a paintbrush and paint and practice so that they could paint what they see in their mind's eye. And you keep practicing, mixing colors, getting strokes, until what you can see in your mind's eye, you can translate onto the paper, right? That's process one. Now, at this stage, you can get totally out of whack, and you could go, I'm an artist, and start painting all sorts of stuff, right? But the role of the artist, or the role of the shaman, or the role of the healer is the same, and that is to be able to prepare yourself, and then step out of the way a little bit, step out of the way a lot, and travel to these other places, these other dimensions, the numinous. See what it is to see that's beyond words. And in this case, it's see, because a musician will hear. A dancer will see the movement. But the artist that I'm talking about, the painter, he's going to see in his mind's eye a vision. And then he has to remember, and then come back and practice that coming back. And then allowing what he's seeing, or what she's seeing, to be able to paint that. But there's hundreds of scenes. There's scenes of rubbish, and there's scenes of essential stuff. So it's practicing becoming the instrument, practicing traveling to this other place, practicing remembering, practicing knowing how to find essential stuff, seeds and tools. Remembering that, bringing them back, painting them, that strengthens the channel. And then becoming guardian, not owning it. That's not my vision. That's just what I'm guardian of, you know. And so once that process is streamlined, then we have learnt how to be a conduit or a bridge from spirit into matter. And that's important, because that's that first process I was talking about, involution, how spirit gets enchanted into matter. So if we were a tree and we were capturing sunlight and we were pulling in all the light of the cosmos channeled through our local ISP, the sun, and then capturing all of that and then mixing all our ancestral realms, all the beings that have died before us, bringing them up, and then mixing those two, that cosmic light of the future and those ancestral realms of the past, the light and the dark, heaven and earth, and mixed those, and then created a whole array of phytochemicals and complex sugars, like our food, our medicine, our building material, our firewood, our fiber. You know, the alchemists are just basically building out of light all of this stuff. And so, and then humans come along, you know, and you walk along and you say, I'll have that apple, you know, and then you start eating that apple, and then you walk to the other side of that field or the other side of the planet. And then with that energy, you get to walk and talk. But as we're in Africa, you know, they say if you can walk and talk, you can sing and dance. And that's our job. Our role on this planet is to gather those stories, is to be that shaman, that healer, that artist, is to be able to act as an anchor for divine love in this dimension, is to help draw that energy in. And whether it's cultivating plants or whether it's becoming a painter, it's the same process. So we're making it so that when we gather light, either in the way we grow plants or in the way in which we paint, what we're actually doing is we're adding spin, we're adding more value to that. So that's our role of involution. And our role of evolution is as important, and it's the disenchanting or the spiritualizing of matter, whether we take that tree and we make a fire, and now what's happening is the flames and the smoke are going up as an offering back to the source, back to where they came from. And how we treat that fire will determine the quality of the energy in its return. And the ash goes down and feeds this ancestral world. There's all these other beings that now live in the earth. Okay? So, as humans, we get to feed heaven and earth through everything we think, everything we do, through every action, whether we're eating that food. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to play a computer game? Are we going to meditate? Are we going to sing? Are we going to dance? So each one of us has this responsibility of what to do. And this is exactly what the Gnostics were doing. They were feeding the source with higher and higher frequency stuff. And so what they were doing is they were taking these sacraments in order to reconnect and in order to become part of this Earth's biocircuitry. This is another creation type story from an ancient Brahmanic text called the Chogyam Upanishad. And the Chogyam Upanishad says, and I'm paraphrasing here, the sun and the moon and the stars and galaxies, the mountains, the oceans, the lakes, all exist in a lotus-shaped temple in your heart. Now how can this be? Is it my heart or your heart? But it's all of our hearts, right? Because when they're talking about your heart, they're addressing only one person, and that's you. And again, the mind cannot conceive that each one of us could be that being, but it is. It's the holographic or the fractal nature of the universe that mystics and sages have talked about through time, but our scientists are now corroborating. This is amazing. This is now becoming quantum scientific fact, if that's even, oxymoronic. Maybe more moronic than oxy, I don't know. That we need to verify our very existence by some person telling us, yes, you exist. We've done the double-blind testing for 14 years on rabbits. You exist. It's ludicrous. So, the very people throughout time and still today who engage in this form of Gnosticism, in finding out who they are, in using teacher plants to connect with themselves and heal themselves, are still persecuted today under the drug laws or whatever other law there is. Imagine your government saying, as your government, we can tell you how quick to kill yourself by saying, well, you can take this, but not. You can smoke cigarettes and drink Coca-Cola and drive cars, all of which we know are fantastic killers. But, it's a calculated risk. But God forbid you should want to maybe smoke marijuana that doesn't have any known deaths. Ooh, no, we've got to protect the children, or whatever other excuse they have. And so this war on you finding out who you are and your expanded consciousness is still going on today. And it's not your governments. What these Gnostics talked about 1600 years ago in the Nag Hammadi text is actually quite mind-blowing. They said that from their research, and this is deep research doing what the plant people in this room are doing, going inside, deep journeys, going to other dimensions, meeting beings, questioning. Years of groups of people doing that together. They started to corroborate a picture that for thousands and thousands of years previous to them, there had been a parasite that fed on humans. And this was an invisible parasite because it did not actually have a body. This was beings from a different dimension that when humans acted in a particular way, they could literally keep their energy. And their job was to keep them acting in that way so that they could keep feeding. And the two tools that they use most, I may have a slide for it later, are fear and ignorance. Because when humans are in fear or ignorance, they leak energy. And existence's way, existence is so benign that it shows us, when you leak energy, you start to feel not so good, you feel drained, you feel tired, you get sick. Existence is showing you because you are part of the immune system of the planet. And if you're not doing your job, its job is to show you you're not doing your job. And the way it shows you is by your body deteriorating or you're getting disease. And so, the immune system of the planet is alerting us everywhere it can for where we're not doing our job. In other words, our job in this instance is to be love. Our job is to do what I was talking about, is amplify the light energy as it comes to the planet and then amplify it as it goes back. So it comes back more in high and high vibratory mechanisms. That's our job as humans. And in order to do that job, we have to be in love. And if we're in fear and ignorance, we can't be in love. And so these beings, and they probably work for the big boss too. They to keep everything in line possibly. But these beings, their job is to keep you in fear and ignorance. So as long as there's war on this planet and any conflict, these guys are having a feast. And you can go and sit with some vegetalista and curanderos in the Amazon basin, and in their journeys they can see this vast amount of beings feeding. Okay, so we'll roll on. The times that we're living in now have been prophesied by many different cultures as the return of Kukulkan, which is the feathered serpent, or Quetzalcoatl, or the rainbow serpent, or the end of the dreaming and the beginning of another, or the end of the Kali Yuga. There's so many different names, and maybe they're all just fantasy, who knows? But let's imagine for a moment that these prophecies are all true and they are talking about the return of Sophia. It then becomes each one of our responsibilities walking on the planet to become the midwives for this process. Or step aside, you know. But if you happen to be in opposition, okay, then the challenge is for us to not go into fear or ignorance and find out what our role is in that opposition. And different people have different types of roles. And even though I can intellectualize them, I don't know. So, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, there's a famous story, and I can't even remember, I think it's Arjuna and Krishna or something, and he's going to battle, and he said, I don't want to be a soldier. And he said, yeah, but this is your job, you know. You go in, you kill. Don't get attached. It's acting, you know. There's Tibetan archers who practice killing with love, because they don't know when they're going to have to oppose that king who's going to destroy that whole part of Middle Kingdom, and they may have to just take an arrow and shoot them, but totally without karma. So they have to train to shoot that arrow with love. Bang. We can't. Our culture's incapable of that sort of stuff. You know, we get all caught up in the story. We angry, and then we create more. Then we're in the wheel of karma. We drive that wheel of karma. So, I'm not proposing, like John Lash, that you join this party that he started to actually stop some of these, whether they're politicians or corporate leaders or invisible beings that are parasitizing humanity. Now, the source of this story is not just the Gnostics. If any of you are interested, you can go online and have a look. There's a book called Wetika. This psychological parasite's been around for a long time. Wetika is the name that the First Nation Amerindians have for the psychological parasite. And then when you start to look, you'll see many, many different old world cultures have different names for this psychological parasite. So what we have to start to explore is this, the most advanced technology created. It's not this spaceship here. Oh. Contrary to popular belief. It's closer to that one there, that lotus. That lotus there is Nalamba Nucifera, or the sacred lotus. And according to the Tibetans and the Indians, is, you know, whether it's Vishnu or Brahma or Shiva or Kuan Yin or Buddha, their association with this plant, according to the Tibetan Buddhists, is because that plant and humans come from the same dimension. They come from a place called Pure Land or Lotus Land. And they're here on earth to do a specific job. And that job is the job that job description is the one I've been unfolding to you right now. But just, okay, we'll get back to it. That little spaceship I did point to was actually a picture was taken by a Mexican UFO researcher. And his claim is that those ones are actually living beings in that shape. And they come in and out of volcanoes and all sorts of things. But the technology that it'll start again. The technology that I was talking about, the most advanced technology that we've come across, is the human body. And it's not just the human body, it's the human body in its greater body, which is the earth, and it's the human body in its greater body with the spirit, immortal spiritual being that's inhabiting that body, creating part of a circuit between spirit and matter. We've lost the instruction manual. It's like we're sitting in a Porsche and we have no idea how this thing works. We're listening to the radio. We haven't even found the ignition key yet. Okay? Our body is capable of incredible stuff, and some of us have probably heard some of these stories from Indian mystics of the city powers of being able to bilocate, or going into the western desert of Australia and hearing about beings that are communicating telepathically, that can travel backwards and forwards, not only through space, but through time. That can heal instantly, that can rebuild their bodies. This is the realm, this is what the body is designed to actually do. The fact that we can't do it shows us how disconnected we are. Shows us that we've lost the operating manual. And some of these teacher plants give us the opportunity to download that manual. I don't know if you remember that in that scene in The Matrix where Trinity's, she's approaching this helicopter and she's like, whoa, I got to fly a helicopter, and the guy up there plugs in the program to fly a helicopter, and she's like, yep, okay, I can fly one. That's kind of more what humans are designed to do, if we remember. We can speak to the plants, we can speak to the rocks, we can speak to the ancestors that have died in their physical bodies hundreds, thousands of years ago. We can speak to people that haven't even been born yet, if we know how. Okay. Maybe. Just a story. See? Brought to you by NEC.
We've got a sponsor.
So where do we go from here? It's starting to recognize what this signal is that we all tune into. There's a sound, there's a song, there's a light show. All we have to do is go, pretend it's playing, let's start trying to listen to it, let's hear what it's saying, and let's respond in a meaningful way, like the First Nation people in Southwest America say, does it grow corn? In other words, I'm not talking about just speaking to the trees, nice tree. I'm talking about getting meaningful information from that tree that can heal your body, your community, the planet. And if not, then yes, it's just entertainment. So the question is, when the slide comes up, is God a DJ? And of course the answer is yes. In the sense that back in the days, DJs used to have vinyl records, and the role of the DJ, there was one groove, contrary to popular belief, on a record, for those of you who don't know what a record is. It has one spiral on it. And so the DJ would link the end of this spiral to the beginning of that spiral continually on, and play this one piece of music and try and connect the response of what was happening there on the dance floor to motivate, let me get this spiral out. But in essence, the story I'm really telling you about is, if you happen to be deaf and you walked into a room, a discotheque or a dance floor, and you watched all these people jumping about, dancing, and they were all synchronized. And you're trying to work out, all right, who's the leader? Who are they following? That one seems to be looking at that one. That one's looking at... if you couldn't tell, you could try and look for the mechanism that synchronized these people. But the moment you could hear the music, you'd realize they're not dancing with each other. They're dancing to the music and they're all synchronizing. And this is what nature's doing. All of nature is grown on the song of love, broadcast from everyone and everything else. The sun, for example, the solar sonic, the sound that the sun's making, that music, they're all dancing to it. The earth spins, the sun's still there. It never rises or sets. But the earth spins, and it seems like the sun's rising, and all the birds are singing, and the insects, and they're all dancing and singing to the sun. Everything is coordinating with this music, except us. You know? So we need to kind of clock into what is it that we're doing? How do we start to listen? How do we start to listen to the music of the cosmos? And how do we learn to dance, you know, with that music? Because that's our job, eh? How we going?
If I plug it in, as you switch to the slide, you have a brief moment of slide.
A brief, oh, so it's not even going back to the slide anymore.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, okay. Maybe just leave it.
Switch it on.
Yeah.
If it keeps periodically coming back on, then just leave it on. If not, just leave it off.
As long as you guys aren't having epileptic seizures.
Epileptic seizures.
But even just such a good.
Okay, so this part is kind of a little bit. I could just tell you a story for a brief moment. What if John Lash is right and the 1600-year-old Gnostic texts from Nag Hammadi point to interdimensional imposter alien demigods posing as gods and using artificial technology to create fear and ignorance in order to tap and control the human and planetary resources, matrix style, enslaving and devolving us in the process? What if we are immortal, time-traveling spirit beings, avatars if you prefer, that incarnate through and into the earth plane, the goddess head, by traveling through a birth canal and growing a bio-flesh suit in which to complete our mission here on earth? What if the beings that wish to control us and the planetary resources of which we are meant to be steward know that by universal law they need our consent to access the precious resources of biology, genetics, and our attention? And to get our consent, they use the tools of fear and ignorance to force consent. So this next slide has a whole list of things saying chemtrails, GMOs, vaccines, disruptive EMFs, fracking, pesticides, pollutants, pharma drugs. And essentially, it's what if these beings know that to tap this energy from the planet, they need to disarm and distract humans and their plant, animal, and microbiological allies. Our microbiological immune system, using a full spectrum array of disruptive frequency, lowered immune system, and mind control. I think it's kind of interesting that the word government comes from governmentus. Mentis is the mind control. I mean, the reason they use the word government and not mind control is probably because we wouldn't be voting them in power, right? What if disconnection is purposeful? What if we have repeated the cycle before of awake and asleep and left ourselves the best clues we could that would withstand time and transcend language? What if our planet was designed as a living library and ark to send other star systems to seed other star systems with life, and its control was fought after through time? It's been suggested that the earth and human bodies share the abilities as above, so below, that I was talking about, the so-called city powers of being able to teleport and move around. So our earth essentially can actually move to other star systems to seed them with life. And, you know, that has all sorts of consequences. What happens, what if our time-space suits were constructed out of infinitely renewable, living units that were adaptive, self-repairing, and essentially immortal, and could continually upgrade to suit a number of different climates, conditions and terrains, and indeed could morph and adapt by belief? What if these cells had synergistic relationships with other cellular beings and traded resource and energy and awareness in a mutually beneficial way? Did it pop on? What if the introduction of monotheism out of Egypt via Moses and Akhenaten, and seeding the Middle East birth portals with Islam, Judaism and Christianity was part of the program to suppress Sophia, the feminine aspect of the divine as explored by the Gnostics in order to keep war going and create the very disruption needed to keep control of the planet, her custodians and allies? After all, the Gnostics were the first victims of the Inquisition. Well, I managed to keep that one going for a while. What if the re-mean bearing and reawakening of Sophia and who we are awoke the planet to fulfill its destiny? What if the microbes not only defend the planet and its beings from incarnating invaders using disease as a weapon in War of the Worlds style, but also create an evolving, living, adaptable matrix, the immune system of planet Earth? Just think about us having to grow a human body. You know, the human body is an amazing natural phenomenon. It's evolved over billions of years. Not one ancestor in your mother's lineage died before giving birth. And not one ancestor in your father's lineage died before giving birth. In other words, you are the product of two multi-billion-year-old lineages. It's incredible. You know, it's just bodies unfolding out of bodies, unfolding out of bodies, onwards and onwards. You know? And so it's literally like one being, just flopping into the next, into the next. The spiritual being itself may dip in and out of consciousness. But in terms of the body is just one continuous being of these two lineages, which is pretty amazing. But you know, it's evolved for billions of years with all these other creatures in a very interesting way. And that protects you in all sorts of ways. And just to put that in perspective, your body is 90% not you, from a cellular perspective. You've got 10 trillion cells and 100 trillion other cellular creatures living on your body. You know, so you're 1/10 human. And by genetics, you're 100th human. You know, it's amazing. So, right now in this room, your cells are respiring, they're taking up nutrients, they're getting rid of toxins, your kidneys are functioning, your liver, none of which you're aware of. It's all going on. 90 to 99% of what's going on in the body, our awake being is unaware of. And luckily so, because we wouldn't be able to do anything if we had to use our brains and attention to stay in that mode. Oh, got to filter that blood with those kidneys. You know, so when we grow a body, when we come in as an awake, immortal, spiritual being, we all have to come through the same pathway into a mother, grow in a womb, and then today you don't even need to come through a vagina. You can just get cut out by a surgeon, But there's a reason we're born through the birth canal. It's not just because that pressure triggers all the pressure points along the head, the neck, the shoulders, all along the body, as if it's turning it on as it comes through the birth canal. Not only that, you come out right next to the anus, and that's not a design flaw, because that is where you are going to get covered in the microbes of your mother, which she got from her mother, which she got from her, onwards and onwards, back in time. So those microbes that are now going to inhabit your garden, that's still outside of your body, by the way, those microbes are going to be there to do some very special things. They're going to digest your food for you because your body, or for your body, because your body can't digest food. As a spiritual being, you can't even eat food. All you can do is guide your bodies to eat food. So they're going to digest your food for your body. They're going to produce a whole set of incredible chemicals that basically builds and maintains your immune system. And lastly, they're going to do something really interesting, which is kind of what this talks about, is they're going to provide a set of neurochemistry to actually keep you awake. And when I say keep you awake, I'm going to have to define this because this is where it gets tricky. That set of neurochemistries is generated 90% of your serotonin, your waking consciousness, and 90% of your dopamine, which is your feel-good factor, is generated by these microbes in the gut. That's pretty amazing stuff. And it's significant because most of the time when we're walking around, we're in default consciousness mode. And it's only when we do certain practices where we can switch into being human cognition mode, which is not generated from this neurochemistry in our gut. The neurochemistry in the gut is designed to keep this alive, which is the house for the spirit while the spirit's walking around on the planet. And it's designed to create neurochemistry in what we would call survival mode or thrival mode. It's designed to know what it can eat, what it can't eat, what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. If there's something with fangs that look like it can eat you, shut off all the functioning of the body, pump out adrenaline, fight or flight, run. The body is super intelligent. It does all this stuff. The human's still thinking, is that a lion? No. It wouldn't last a minute if we were thinking for our body. And martial artists know this. Martial artists, if you're learning, who here has seen Karate Kid? So Karate Kid, he goes to the master, he's about to get in an important fight, with the local bully, and he goes to the Kung Fu master, he says, teach me, and the master says, I'll teach you, but there's only a week before you got to fight, And the master starts him off painting fences. All right, I'll paint fences. Paints fences, and then the next day the master's like, wax my car, wax on, wax off, and he's like, what are you doing? And he said, trust me, But what he's actually doing is a thing called practice. And that practice builds a very specific thing called neuroplasticity, or new neural pathways. And so while he was doing the wax on, wax off, he was training his brain to do this movement. So that when he ends up fighting the bully punches him. If he had to think, oh, that's a punch, I better get out of the way too slow. But his hand does that automatically because it's been practiced and trained. And so his body is now doing these things automatically. Now we have to do that same form of practice if we want to be human. This is what all these spiritual traditions do, whether it's mantra or yoga. What they're trying to do is orient and reset the body into a different form of consciousness. And this is where these teacher plants really kick in. You know, this is where the teacher plants enable us to almost wipe clear and restart. An analogy would be something like, imagine you live in a hut over here, and each day you walk through over the head-high grass down to the river to get water, and you walk this meandering path down to the river, and you get your water, and then you walk back. Taking something like San Pedro is like starting a felt fire. Burn down all that grass, you know. And then you go, oh, there's a much shorter cut to the river. And you start walking that one. That's the equivalent of seeing a new perspective, seeing that there's a better path, and now you start walking that path. But you've got to keep walking it while the grass is growing. Because if that path is not established properly, one day you're down at the river collecting water, and that lion does come, you'll run back along the old path. Just because automatically that's the way your body will go, that's the way you'll go. You know? And most of us have had these experiences, you know. You give up smoking, it's, 6 months in, you're like, whoa, I'm doing great, and then some big assignment, you lose your job, and you're under stress, oh God, I'm smoking again. So what happens is we have to do that pathway again and again and again. We've got to walk that new path till it's the path and this other one's overgrown. And that's what practice is. So now we're getting to, a little bit closer to what these microbes are doing and how they form a cloud network between all the different living stuff on the planet. So what if these fields of microbes linked up by infrared frequency could join to form a giant organism with cloud-like intelligence and non-local awareness, forming a living matrix of informational access? So bacteria produce the planet's soil, the planet's nutrients, the planet's air, the planet's water, living energy, and they bind the living communities and produce all the chemicals to connect them all up. So everything in this thin film around the planet, the trees, the water, the humans, everything's all actually within like a cloud of microorganisms. That's kind of invisible to the eye. But that cloud acts like one organism. And so our body and all of this stuff is all communicating all the time, real time. It's only the idea of who we think we are that's disconnected, that's not in touch with that. Cool. So our true purpose is then to awake and reconnect with the earth. Reconnect with the earth is only possible if we reconnect with ourselves first. And so that's why these entheogenic or God-revealing plants are so important, because it's almost as if there was a time we were awake on the planet and we said, okay, there's going to be a time where we're going to go to sleep. We were going to forget this. So we're going to hide all of these gifts of awakening in this plant over here, in this pyramid over here, in this carving over here, in these stone circles over there, so that the time comes when there is a reawakening, these tools will be all around us, and we'll be able to communicate with them as soon as we awaken. So the process is, some of those people sacrificed going through you could say this logical evolution of cutting themselves off just to develop a particular form of intellect, a particular form of logic, because don't think that there are any mistakes. The divine is orchestrating this immaculately. And us whiteys, those of you in the room know I'm talking about the colonial mindset, not the color of your skin. also have a gift, even though they don't know what it is. And so once they come back and reconnect with these old living traditional cultures of the planet, the technologies of the plants, of the crystals, of the birds, you know, once they start to reconnect with those and reconnect with themselves, they will recognize that what they've got through their disconnection is a gift that's part of a giant puzzle. So our true purpose is to remember that our bodies are connected to everything in multiple ways. And we act as portals and anchors, combining the use of all these technological tools, this plant world, to remember who we are, to download the operating instructions, to become part of the living circuitry between the sun and the earth. Okay? And as I said before, those two things there, as soon as you recognize and see them, they're an indicator of two things. One is that the psychological parasite exists, and two is if you're feeling them, then you are part of giving your energy away and not engaging in your role of being custodian of the earth, which means awakening to who you are and reconnecting, using these plants to heal. So the center cognitive organ of the Neo-Gnostic, of the human being, is the heart. Now there's an amazing Heart Math Institute that's logged an incredible story on the heart, which I'm not going to go into tonight. But just to share this with you, the brain as a cognitive organ is only one of many cognitive organs in the body, but the main ones are this brain here, which I was just telling you about, which is about roughly 2 kilograms of microbes, the same weight as roughly this one, and just as intelligent, just operates on a different one. This one operates on a 0 and a 1 like a computer, right or wrong, left or right, up or down. This one's much more emotional, gut feel. It knows. It knows because it's connected to this vast field of knowing that's billions of years old. But it's actually this one here, the heart, 60% neural tissue, that if this does not, or this does not operate with this one, are out of alignment and out of balance with the rest of existence. And so one of the primary functions of these medicines, like Somacacia or ayahuasca or San Pedro, is to reconnect the biocircuitry through the heart. And you will know when you're functioning, when you're open and soft-hearted. Thanks for your operation. So I've already discussed the disconnection. And you know, it's if this disconnection was planned, you know, and that's obviously just speculation, but if it was, you know, the old paradigm is disconnected. The beings will not have self-responsibility. They'll be desensitized. They'll act dishonorably. But if we cultivate right relationship with ourselves, others, and the planet, our sensitivity will increase. You know, our self-responsibility will increase. And what we'll recognize is that we are tools of nature. Nature is not a commodity for us to chop up and sell, but nature is part of our greater body. And so some of the things that our ancestors realized were sacred can become amazing tools for us. The reason mirrors were sacred to our ancestors is because the mirror-like nature of existence is such that maybe the best way I could describe it is an example. If you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, maybe look in your teeth. Oh, teeth need a brush. Would you brush a reflection? No, absolutely not. Because you know that you could brush for days, weeks, and the teeth in the reflection would never get clean. Whereas you know if you brush your teeth, presto, you've now adjusted the mirror, right? And yet, day in and day out, we are all trying to adjust the mirror. Existence that we see, that our ancestors, all the spiritual beings, all the sages said, this is just a mirror. And yet, there we are, trying to fix it, trying to change it. When really, the only true change we can make is internal. Let's see if we can get into that.
Don't move.
Don't move.
Yeah. Holding my breath.
So the return of Sophia is this. Is the blossoming, the flowering of the human heart. Is each one of us awakening to our true potential. Is awakening to who we are as immortal spiritual beings in a physical world. Is awakening to the idea that we have to become self-responsible. That we can't wait for others to do stuff. We've got to start, and we've got to do it now. And it starts with our own personal reconnection and healing. Some of these plants are incredible tools, but they've got to be used in the right way. And if you're going to use them, do it as responsibly as you can. Find people who know what they're doing. Learn. Take your time. Grow them. Speak to them. Learn some form of diagnostic art like kinesiology or pendulum. Stay plugged in. Do whatever you can to remember who you are, awaken, heal, and then allow that slowly to nurture everything else around you. Recognize the wisdom of our ancients and our elders and honor that. Recognize the beauty of nature. Recognize that if we don't do this, nobody else will. And so, if you want to be part of the reawakening of Sophia, if you want to become a Neo-Gnostic, if you want to become an earth custodian and an earth steward, this is your job. That photograph there is of Adam's calendar, which was meant to be like a couple of 100,000-year-old stone circle. Maybe I should. But these may have been some of the clues that we've left ourselves for this time. And what I propose is that these stone circles, the temples, the pyramids, are all part of a tuning device to turn the whole earth into a machine, a living biological machine, that once the human heart functions in its fullest aspect, it goes into what's called a quantum field. When it functions in love, okay, its field normally can be felt round about the fingertips. The brain's field can be measured round about here, the heart round about here. But when it goes into this quantum type of collapse that we call love, it actually creates a quantum field that can be measured at any distance, not only in space, but any distance in time. In other words, measured in the future and in the past. Now this is really amazing, but any being that manages to reach this state of awakeness, like a Buddha, means that just the fact that they have awoken and they now a radiant being, means any one of us can access that energy at any time in the future. Like right now if you want to. Just like you can access the energy of the sun at any time. It's much easier if you're not in that quantum field to only access it during the day when you're standing in the sun and feeling its light and heat. But once you're awakened, that sun will never set, because truly it doesn't. And what it is that your heart is actually a localized sun. The sun that we see in the sky is the mirror of this. When we're looking in the mirror with our teeth to try and brush them, that thing we see, well, that's what when we're looking at the sun, this is what it's mirroring. And when this is awake, this affects everyone and everything. And it's been shown. And you guys can go and look. And this is not just mythology. This is actually what the science is showing. That when there's a coherent field that we call love, nature responds. Everything in proximity can respond. You can be thinking of your mother in New York City, and she'll feel it. Sometimes she'll pick up the phone and go, "Hey," and I was just thinking about you. You know, and we've all had these sort of experiences. Going for the next one. Some of the ways in which the Earth responds to these frequency shifts is things like those crop circles. But as humans, this man here from the emu tribe, he's covered himself in ochre. He's covered himself special energy lines with emu feathers. He's created this massive thing of hair and plants on his head. And now he's going to go and dance over a special sacred site at a special time. And as he does that, he's going to create an oscillating field so that he can actually act as a conductor for the energy of the cosmos to come through him and into the earth. And because he's from the emu tribe, what he's going to be doing is he's going to make sure that there's enough energy on the planet to support emu's existence. And if he doesn't do his dances properly, for the neighbours to come and hunt their emus, they're going to come and complain to him and his tribe and say, "Wait, no emus to hunt. Go and do your ceremony." And so everyone in this system is all bound into nature because they are acting as the custodians. They claim to have been here for over 1 million years. They claim to have come. I'll tell you a story because it's a fascinating story. Stephen Evans Strong, father and son, scientists, they've got origine blood. They went round Australia to many different tribes to collect blood, to do a mitochondrial DNA search, to find out how old the origines of Australia were. Some amazing things. The origine elders said to them, "We'll give you our blood on condition that you tell our story, no matter how crazy it makes you sound." And they said, "Deal." They took the blood. Not only was it 10 times older than the Out of Africa blood story, shocking as that is, not one scientific publication which would touch their peer-reviewed research. Nature wouldn't publish it. Science wouldn't publish it. Why? Yeah, but why? Now think about it. Anyway, the story that these elders told these guys was that they came from the Pleiades 1 million years ago. They weren't the first culture to come to this planet. They're just one of the more recent ones. They said they've been here for 1 million years and they came from a super technologically advanced culture. They arrived on this planet on a ship made of light. When it hit the atmosphere, it turned into crystal. It hit the earth, it split open and they came out. And they chose to live in a very particular way that would be like the first day. They chose to live in a way that if they continued to live that way, that the system they were living in would perpetuate infinitely. In other words, they were living in what's called the voice of the first day. They're dreaming. And so their dream law, L-O-R-E, prohibits them doing certain things like developing technology. They know about wheels, they know about spaceships, they know about everything. They do not go there. You know why? Because they know where it leads. It leads to where we are now. They've been there already. And they know of hundreds of cultures that have done that before. It dead ends. This technological thing dead ends. You've got to come back. They already know that they have the most advanced technology, their bodies. Okay? So all their technology is internalized. So when us as colonists from England arrived in Australia, we couldn't see that the technology was so advanced that it was invisible. We just assumed they didn't have any. So this is a really interesting story. But what that guy is doing is he's playing his role in keeping the earth alive in a very particular way. And I'm not suggesting we all go back to hunter-gatherers. They said they've been on every continent on the earth, and every time a culture started to develop agriculture, they would leave. Because they knew. Because agriculture, pastoralism, industrialization, civilization, war, collapse, start again. It's been going on and on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we just see the odd thing and we go, ooh, what's this pyramid in Egypt? Who are these guys? Who are those guys? Here's some more there.
What about that cloud?
I don't know. I don't know. I put it there because I thought it was interesting. Some people say there's spiritual significance. All the mountains to a lot of these cultures are called, in South America they're called apus. They're very powerful places. As soon as you start to go to the peaks off the earth, so the earth, the best way I could describe it to you is the energy up here is different to the energy down here. When you stand on the earth, there's a different charge on the earth to where your head is. If you took a metal ball and you applied a charge to it, all the charge would go onto the outside, right? If you then took a pin off that metal ball, the charge would actually go up to the pin and concentrate on the tip of that pin and come off in an arc. That's how electricity flows to the edges and then to points. So think of the earth as a giant bioelectromagnetically charged being. Then trees from where they're rooted to the top have charge. That charge, for example, enables water to levitate up those trees. It's not going up, you're not getting 1,000 litres going up a eucalypt up 100 foot by capillary action. No way. So your heart as a pump can pump a brick 6 foot into the air. But in order for your heart to pump the blood through your arteries, your veins, your capillaries, your microcapillaries, it needs to pump that brick 140 foot in the air. There's a lot of missing pressure. That missing pressure comes around because the heart doesn't pump the blood. The blood pumps the heart. The center of the blood is iron. It's spinning like this in a dynamo, in this electric field. As it's moving in these spirals in the body, it's generating energy. It's pumping the heart. So the heart's just like a little kid running one of those wheels down the road. Okay. Now you take a mountain. The top of that mountain is high energy. That's why so many people go to the tops of mountains. Some people climb them for the thrill. Some people climb those mountains to seek spiritual awakening. They'll sit in a cave or they'll drink water. The water actually rises to the tops of those mountains and comes out through levitation, through that like energetic pool. So there's all sorts of amazing stuff going on. So I think those mountains creating that charge, the clouds come along, and according to our ancestors, those clouds are conscious as well. And they then gather in the vortex created by that spiritual frequency. And I think that's part of what we see in there.
And it's a nice picture.
And it's a nice picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I propose an intermission and just so that people that you need to leave can leave, and then we'll just continue?
Sure. I'd say 5 more minutes.
Okay, and then we'll just continue.
A long 5 minutes. No. So our forests have become these glowing temples of light, where every being is tuned to its role as being part of this reception of the cosmos and this digestion of the cosmic light and its availability to actually be returned in a high frequency. And so our cooking, our singing, our dancing, our lovemaking, everything is an opportunity for us as beings to weave love into that return flow, to liberate that energy back, to disenchant that energy and send it back to the source in a particular way. And all the creatures of the oceans and the lakes and the forests are all participating in this very thing. And as we awaken as humans, we'll actually be able to witness them doing that. Because at the moment, we just think they in the survival of the fittest game, because that's what we're in. We don't see the world the way it is, we see it the way we are. So if we want to become the sacred nectar gatherers and actually do that process I said in the beginning, where we literally go to these dimensions and return with goods and re-energize the earth, then using these magical plants as a reset becomes vital. Participating in this process of getting our shit together. Working out what some of these wonderful tools are. Today, there are so much data. There's beautiful books. There's communities like this. There's stuff online. You can go and find out and meet with experienced teachers. You can connect with plants and plant people. You can grow these plants. I think I may just end here. Yeah, it's okay. That's it. It says shamanic ectoplasmic initiation. And I'm just going to share with you, to finish off, this particular being's story. This being here is a being, he's no longer in the physical body. His name is Don Esteban. And he's a beautiful traveling healer. But what I wanted to share with you is the story. These guys, he's from the Sequoia Nation in Ecuador. What they'll do is they will, you can leave it off. What they'll do is they will spend a lifetime, starting often as young children, and they will diet on particular plants. Now, most of these plants are not the entheogens plants we talk about. They're healing plants, and they heal different aspects of the body, but it's impossible to heal an aspect of the body without healing an aspect of the mind. Because like I discussed, we can't digest anything, only our gut microbes can. But each plant has associated with it a specific colony, and each specific colony is cultivated by the plant itself and acts as transferal of the nutrition, the immune system, and the neurochemistry. And so what happens is as we diet on a plant, these guys will go into the forest and maybe eat one plant for 6 months. And they'll learn that plant's medicine, its muti, its spirit, its song. And it will start to recolonize the gut in a particular way. It will introduce a very specific form of bacteria that it will, after that dieting process, will become a more fixated and a more permanent part of the colony. They'll then do that to another plant and another plant. And all the while they may drink, that guy you saw there, he will drink yahe in between. Yahe is like a very powerful form of ayahuasca. It uses 2 vines instead of the Banisteriopsis carpi and the Psychotria viridis. It uses Banisteriopsis carpi and another plant called Diploptris caberana. And together, those 2 Malpighiaceae vines make a drink called yahi or yahe. And that has the most powerful endogenous brain chemical in it called 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. It also has bufotenine and dimethyltryptamine, as well as harmine and harmaline and tetrahydroharmaline. It has a whole bunch of stuff. But what that will do for them is it will then recalibrate the microbe colony and also keep nourishing that colony in a particular way, and also inform them what the next plant to eat is, and also keep that whole system going. So by the time those guys are 70 or 80 or 90, and the guy I drank was 96, like the guy I drank with, he had been drinking since he was 8. Okay? Healthy looking bugger, he looked like he was 60. Okay? He'd stayed up all night, all day and all night doing this ritual. And for a guy who was 96, I was just shocked. He fasted the whole day just to drink medicine that night. One of the rituals I wanted to share with you is so they'll build up this super duper gut colony. And then they do this amazing thing. They'll have an initiate who's like an apprentice that may be working with them for years and years. And then at a certain point, they will share with him what's called their spirit essence or their mariri. And so in a ceremony, in a trance, they will regurgitate this ectoplasm, which is kind of like their living library of their gut microbes of all these different plants, allies that they've now formed relationship. They will then gift to the initiative to eat, so that they could start where he had left off. And remember, he's probably got it from his teacher, So imagine the level of neurochemical sophistication and diversity. Imagine the immune systems these guys have. No wonder they, living till 90 and 100 in the jungle with all this stuff eating you and biting you. It's incredible. Yeah. So, thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did.
So, also, if there are any questions, people who want to maybe leave can just...
Yes, I think what we'll do is we'll just give out the prizes for the lucky draw. Just tell you about what we've got going over here, and then we'll open it up to questions. And then anyone who would like to join us for some dinner, please do so downstairs. So let's just once again give Dan a huge round of applause. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you're doing, Dan.